Chili is the trusted partner for pairing, matching, and data enrichment, helping companies hire better talent faster. Chili help recruiters connect candidates with jobs by enhancing the candidate experience, simplifying the hiring process, reducing hiring costs, and saving time and money. For more information, visit www.rchili.com.
What great ideas are so close within your grasp? Seeing other points of view, anticipating change, considering multiple possible turnouts, acknowledging uncertainty, searching for compromise. We're going to talk about how to get over those limiters of innovation so that you can extract better thinking from yourself and your team. So let's talk about how to win the future.
This week I'm joined by Martyn Redstone, or Mr. AI. Martyn's been in recruitment for nearly 2 decades, with over a dozen years immersed in rec tech, and long before AI became the buzzword it is today, he was already helping recruiters create smart, responsible automation strategies. From building some of the earliest recruitment chatbots to running the first AI automation agency in our sector, Martyn's been right at the heart of conversational AI. We dig into how technology is reshaping candidate experience, what recruitment can learn from e-commerce, and maybe even peek into the slightly dystopian future where AI talks to AI to find your next job. Welcome back, everybody, to the Marketing Rules podcast. It's my pleasure to welcome on board Martyn Redstone. Martyn, Mr. AI himself, is kind of joining me today. Martyn, for anyone who's been living under a rock and doesn't know of your work or anything that you kind of talk about online, maybe it's kind of worth giving everybody a little kind of brief summary about what you do, your background, and the kind of things you talk about now.
Yeah, so thanks for having me. Thanks for the invite. It's great to finally be here on the podcast. So for those that don't know me and that have been living under a rock, my name is Martyn Redstone. I have been in the industry for, it's just about 19 years now. Last 13 years have been in the rec tech kind of area. But for the last 7 years, so before AI was sexy, I have been working with recruiters on their AI and automation strategy. 5 years ago, I founded what I think is the first ever AI and automation agency that was specializing in recruitment.
And have you got a background in recruitment? Have you ever worked as a recruiter?
Yes. So I have that as well. So like I said, I've been in the industry for 19 years, and on the rec tech, kind of sole rec tech side of things for about 13 years. So my first part of my career history, I worked as a recruiter, worked for Reed. I was there for 6-7 years. So I started off life as a recruitment consultant in their healthcare side of things. And then I went on to do things like innovation within the business, but then finished my time there doing kind of solution design and account management in their RPO and MSP business. So hands-on recruitment experience as well as kind of across the board from agency to kind of RPO.
And what kind of led you in this on this AI path? Because as you said, you were here before it's sexy. Well, I mean, you were here before it's sexy, and then when it's sexy, and it's probably a bit unsexy again now, to be honest. But but what led you down that path? Kind of how did you kind of get there?
Yeah, it's a great question. So before recruitment, I was I'm an engineer by trade, as my granddad would say, or would have said, and my degree was computer science. I've always been interested in computers, technology, and those kind of things. And when I was doing the hands-on recruitment, I suppose that's what led me down the road of being kind of in the innovation team in Reed as well. Is that I was like, do you know what? This can be done so much better with some kind of responsible and sensible technology solutions. And so I started dabbling when I was at Reed anyway in project management, process improvement, and what have you. And that's kind of where I stayed really until through kind of different guises until I really got into recruitment technology when I started doing kind of, CRM implementations, ATS implementations, payroll implementations, those kind of things. But actually, back in 2017, 2016, I was doing a project for the ONS, which is the UK, the English Central Government Office for National Statistics, and I was running a large recruitment project for them because I was more of a project manager in those days, and um, they wanted to throw loads and loads of people at this screening part of the process. So 30 people working 24/7 to screen thousands upon thousands of people. I was like, there's just got to be a better way of doing it than having all these people involved. And that's when I started looking into chatbots. And that was back in 2016. There wasn't really any recruitment chatbot that had kind of any significant experience to bring them in on that project. But fast forward to 2017, I'd been keeping in touch with a couple of vendors in that space, and I was invited to join a recruitment chatbot vendor as their EMEA lead, and started doing that. Worked with them for a couple of years, but kind of fell in love with the whole kind of chatbot thing and conversational AI thing. And I suppose when we talk about AI, it's wide ranging. There are so many different types of AI. But actually, my specialist area is conversational AI. So how do we interact with machines using conversations, which ultimately is the most natural way of interacting with anything around us? And so that's kind of where it first started. I started working specifically with a chatbot vendor 7 years ago. Finished with them after a couple of years. Founded my own agency, which really specialized. Agency as in technology agency, specialized really in conversational AI. So I was building chatbots and voice bots for big staffing businesses, internal TA teams, and also recruitment technology companies as well. And that's what I've pretty much been doing since. My specialist area is conversational AI. Now, interestingly, somebody asked me when I first started working with generative AI. And what I take from generative AI is large language models. And so look back over some of my projects to see just when I started working with the technology. And actually, the first time I started working with GPT-3 was back in July 2020. So been doing it for 4 years now. So generative AI, well, the language model itself, I see it as a subsect of conversational AI because ultimately it's something you can help understand and create language with. And so that's why I've been doing a lot of talking and a lot of work on generative AI, because I've always seen it as a subsect of the work that I do on conversational AI.
And before we kind of jump into kind of how this is evolving the candidate experience, what's the state of conversational AI as it sits today? I think we've all kind of dabbled with chatbots and things in the past, and that's probably most people's experience with conversational AI. So, what's the lay of the land as of kind of the end of 2024?
Yeah, it's interesting because not much has actually changed in terms of the front end technology. So we're still used to chatbots, whether they pop up on a website or whether they're overlaid on a mobile app or they're over WhatsApp or something like that. It's the underlying technology that has changed, and significantly so. So where I go with that is using large language models. We can do things so much better and so much faster when it comes to building the technology and making the experience better. But what it's also meant is a lot of people have seen it as a shortcut as well. And that's the kind of danger area that we get into, where we've seen an explosion of vendors who see large language models as a shortcut to create a chatbot. And so, and also, businesses who are using large language models to create shortcuts to conversational experiences. It's definitely shortened the development phase, but it's not a shortcut. There's still a lot more that has to be taken into account rather than just, having an API going into OpenAI and hoping for the best.
So let's kind of jumping from that into how AI now is changing and evolving the kind of candidate experience and expectations, right? This is, you're at the cutting edge of this really now when so take us through that.
Yeah, so I have some very specific thoughts around this. Now, one of the things that I tend to do is work with and alongside a lot of kind of my peers in the world of e-commerce, in the world of customer service and contact centers and all those kind of things to kind of really understand what's going on out there in the big world of experience and also the big world of conversational AI. And one of the things that I always go back to is that there are three kind of key parts of experience. And this is kind of where the new kind of expectations of experience come from. The first one is immediacy. Can I do something immediately? Do I have to wait around for it? The next one is convenience. Can I do something at a time and a place that I choose to? And the last one is agency. Am I in control of my own experience? And so when we look at experiences that we're kind of used to in the real world, whether that be the online buying experience, whether that be contacting customer service, etc., think about immediacy. Do I have to fill out a form and wait ages for it? Even with the advent of prime delivery, I don't have to wait too long to get something delivered to me. So there's this expectation that things happen pretty much immediately nowadays, and we don't have to wait around. Convenience at a time and a place that I want something to happen. So people aren't really, if you think about booking a holiday, people aren't going into a travel agent anymore. They're doing it online whenever they want to, on a device that they want to, in a place where they want to. And that kind of goes along again with recruitment. Are we and also to recruitment marketing as well, are we engaging people on the right channels? Do people really want to start their internet search on Google anymore? Are they going onto TikTok to find things? Are people looking at employer branding materials on social media, but in order to apply for that job, they're having to then go onto a totally different platform? So again, we think about things like that. And then finally, agency. Are they in charge of their own experience? And that kind of folds in with the previous two as well. So when I think about how recruiters should be using AI, it shouldn't just be, oh look, we've got an interview transcription tool, or oh look, we can create great job descriptions using generative AI. It should also be about how can we utilize AI to improve the experience of the users of our process, and whether that user is a hiring manager, a recruiter, or a candidate. So we take those three pieces, that convenience, immediacy, and agency, and we work out where in the process we can overlay AI or automation to bring those three parts up on the scale, and so create a much better experience. And yeah, that's kind of where my brain goes when I think about experience and expectations. So we also need to think about it from our perspective. When we're doing X, Y, and Z in the real world, what are our expectations, and are they overlaid with the experience we're providing people?
So you mentioned kind of outside of recruitment kind of examples there, kind of e-commerce style kind of examples. Is that where recruitment should be looking for its template on how to increase and engage and just have a much more kind of interesting candidate engagement? Should they be looking, just not kind of looking inwards, but looking kind of what the likes of other industries are doing when it comes to their kind of online experience?
100%. I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, actually, a conference I saw you at a couple of weeks
Yep.
ago. And one of the talks there was fantastic because the speaker, guy called Callum Buxton from Sophia Genetics, he was saying that it wasn't very exciting what he had to talk about, because it wasn't whiz bang AI this and AI that. But he mentioned something that was really, really interesting. They have taken the abandoned cart methodology from e-commerce, and they have brought that into their career site. So for those that don't understand the abandoned cart methodology, we all know it, but we don't realize it's an actual methodology that retailers and e-commerce people use. Is that if you put something into your shopping cart and then you come out of the site, you're going to get an email at some point in the future pretty quickly to say, did you forget something? It looks like you're interested in buying this, etc., etc. And actually that has a significant impact on sales conversions from an e-commerce perspective. And what Callum was talking about was, and he didn't realize at the time that he'd actually enacted this, he kind of almost by accident really, is that he created something very, very similar, where if somebody was halfway through the application process, or had clicked on the apply button and hadn't completed it, they were getting an email back to say, oh, notice you kind of got halfway through your application. Do you want a hand with it, or do you want to come back to it? Here's a link. And actually what he saw was a conversion rate that went up. and everybody wants to have a higher conversion rate on their career site. And that was just one example of how we can use methodology from e-commerce in the world of recruitment. And I totally and absolutely agree. I think that we should be looking at various industries. E-commerce, I think, is the one that has the greater overlap,
Yeah.
because ultimately the people that we're engaging with are on a very similar consumer journey. They're looking for a product, they're looking for a job, they're buying the product, they're entering into a transaction, they're applying for a job, they're entering into a transaction. They then have a process that goes on in the background that they don't tend to see. In e-commerce, it's order gets processed, goes to the warehouse,
Yeah.
picker packers, et cetera, logistics. And it's the same in recruitment, and they sometimes don't see the process going on there as well. And actually, when you talk to retailers and e-commerce providers about their automation, we talk to them about, what are you automating? And one of the biggest things that they're automating is what they call WISMO, where's my order? Because the biggest inquiry they get from a customer service perspective is, where's my order? And so if we would start thinking about it in recruitment and think, well, what was one of the biggest questions an applicant has? Where's my application up to? If we could make that self-serve, if we can provide them agency,
Yes.
then think about the candidate experience. Then, if we could provide them with a self-serve to watch their application go through the process, to know when, to be able to book into interviews, all those kind of things that go along with exactly the same as the e-commerce. Let me book my delivery slot, etc., etc. I mean, the world would be a better place, right?
Well, that was what I was going to ask. Was the example of the abandoned cart isn't necessarily a AI problem; it's an automation kind of issue. It's a
Exactly.
if this then that kind of situation. And you kind of touched on maybe some AI kind of roles within that kind of process. But are there any other kind of processes that AI can kind of pick up from what happens in e-commerce and other industries that we can kind of bring into recruitment?
Oh, goodness me. I mean, where do we start? So if you think about everything, to do with e-commerce, so let you go onto a website, you go on somewhere like Amazon. I always use Amazon because they
Yeah.
AI everything. Um, you think about Amazon, you think about the fact that they serve up recommended products to you because they know everything about you. You think about the speed that they get, that they allow sellers to get their products onto Amazon, with AI generated product descriptions and pricing changes and all those kind of things. And again, some of this stuff is being done in recruitment, AI generated job descriptions and things like programmatic advertising and what have you. But there is just a plethora of things that we can do. You think about AI customer service, voice bots, chat bots, those kind of things as well. Absolutely. There is so much that we can learn, and it starts with job recommendations, the same as product recommendations. It then goes through, you now see on Amazon, rather than having to sift through all of the reviews if you want to read up on something, there's now an AI generated, summary of the reviews, things like that, that we just need to look at and think, that's a really good idea. It's a really,
So
really good idea.
I'll push back on that a little bit. Is I think the likes of Amazon can do stuff like that because they can do it on volume, right?
Mm-hmm.
They've got so many, millions and millions of visitors, which maybe your average recruitment agency or direct employer probably doesn't have. So they might not be able to kind of work on that level, simply because they might not just have the information about. They'd have to you'd have to kind of use what from other people who might not necessarily be the same demographic or something, and make some assumptions. The other thing, I guess, also is with something like e-commerce is you return a lot to those platforms, whereas you probably don't when you're kind of job seeking and job hunting. So, um, again, just trying to be just kind of play devil's advocate. I think there are some holes in the e-commerce kind of comparison, right?
Absolutely.
I think so. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I didn't say it was the perfect example. There's always going to be holes. I mean, look, you don't try on a job
Yeah.
in terms of the the fit and the handle and all those kind of things. But that's why we have probation periods. But at the same time, no, you're quite right. There's always going to be holes in it. I think that we have to look at it, from a scale perspective. You're right. And I'm using Amazon the example, but when you look at platforms like Shopify, that kind of
Yeah.
e-commerce in a box perspective that's more from a direct consumer kind of small, medium-sized kind of retailer or e-commerce business, then again, you look at the tools that are available in there, the built-in generative AI chatbots, and the description creations, and the help with where to buy social media advertising, and all those kind of things. Again, it's built for a different scale, but it still utilizes the best that it can do from an example perspective. So no, you're right. There's always going to be holes in it. I don't say 100% lift and shift, but I say take example from and learn from and see what they're doing. We're not going to have all the technology that e-commerce has or retail has. You've got kind of augmented reality try-ons and all those kind of things. And again, you can do cool things around office walkarounds in VR and what have you. But it's not just about lift and shift. It's about saying, okay, well, there is some crossover in what an e-commerce business does compared to what a recruitment department does, because they're still engaging with candidates or consumers out there in the real world. They're still thinking about, how do we find you? How do we make that decision? How do we transact? How do we keep in touch? How do we engage if if we want an update or we're not happy, or anything like that. So I think it's just and look, I gave this example the other day. There's a brilliant platform called Nibble, and it's a chatbot that actually haggles if people abandon the cart out, the checkout cart. So and there are platforms like I think Boohoo or ASOS, one of the two, that actually implemented it, and again the conversion rate has exploded. We're not going to need haggling at the transaction point, but it might mean that for the more kind of volume roles, the kind of the F&Bs, the hospitalities, the healthcare, the retail roles, where the difference between pennies can make an absolute difference. And if I go back to my recruiter days in the world of healthcare, we would lose or gain nursing candidates from one shift to another, depending on another agency offering them an extra 10 or 20p an hour.
Yeah.
And so when you start thinking about it and thinking, well, actually, we could have a haggling chatbot that could help manage that part of the process. I know we're talking about agencies now, but there's so much we can take from e-commerce and bring in. You just have to know where that overlap is.
Yeah. Let's take it from another perspective then. Let's look at it from the candidate side and how candidates can use AI, right? Because I think that's one of those areas that doesn't necessarily get talked about as much from the candidate's perspective. What's available to them and how they can use these tools to interact with us better, or whatever those processes is. So yeah, talk us through your views on that.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I have a lot of conversations about this, but we don't talk about it enough publicly. And that is the candidate use of AI. And I think that there's a lot going on. We could, whether it's just asking ChatGPT to help build your CV or your resume or your cover letter, to getting involved in interviews and what have you. There's so much going on that's at the hands of a candidate. And what we're seeing is different impacts on the recruitment process. So we're seeing, a larger number of applications because you've got things like AI Apply, which can, just take your CV and make it relevant and send in an application. And we're seeing that. We're seeing, almost a massive flow of quantity coming into recruiters that's just unimaginable and unmanageable. But we're also seeing the impact on recruiters who actually don't know how to handle it as well. And that's one of the biggest conversations that I'm having with people, is how do we handle it? And I think there are kind of three ways that you can handle it. You can either just defend, you can deter and detect. So let's try and detect AI and let's try and stop people from using it, which doesn't work, ultimately, because AI detectors are completely fallible. They're not. You have a lot of adverts saying, "Oh, we're 99% accurate." You're not. There's literally one prompt you can put into your work that will completely and utterly beat any AI detector. So that's not the right way to go, as far as I'm concerned. I think the right way to go is to encourage the use of AI, but responsibly. Give candidates guidelines to say, if you are going to choose to use AI in the process, use it in this way. Your first draft isn't your last response, etc., etc. And so, kind of showing people how to use it. And I saw a great example this morning on Instagram, where, yes, I am young and cool. I still look at stuff on Instagram, where somebody was showing how you can use things like Perplexity and U.com to actually do your pre-interview research, to where you can find examples of things you might be asked, and where those examples have come from. And so I think that's a really healthy way of using it to help you prepare, not just in the chat GPT, can you give me some answers and we can go through some Q&A, but actually to go and do some research, find some actually interesting stuff so that you can talk about it in the interview. So there's a lot of ways that candidates can use it, but recruiters need to work out how best to deal with that, rather than just kind of either pushing back against it or putting their head in the sand.
I guess what you'll end up having is the recruiters having AI to deal with the volume of AI, and you'll just have AI agents just talking to each other, basically.
I mean, that's the kind of dystopian future we're looking at right now. Is I pick up my phone and I say, and I tell my kind of inbuilt AI, I won't say it out loud because it will set everyone's phones off, but I say to my inbuilt assistant, I'm sick and tired of my job. I'm looking for a new job. It knows everything about you. It's got your credentials on there. It's got your CV on there. It says, right, leave it with me. Goes away. 10 minutes later, it comes back and says, right, I've had 318 conversations with different chatbots or different agents. We've gone back and forth. We've worked out you're a great fit on 12 of these, and I've already booked them into your calendar. Yeah, why not? If we're going to go down that route, that's literally the dystopian future we're looking at.
Yeah. And on that cheery note, Martyn, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm sure we'll have you back on in the future to crack through that dystopian future that we've just described.
Absolutely.
But for now, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. And don't forget, you can subscribe to the Marketing Rules podcast on Apple, Spotify, and all other major podcasting platforms. I've been your host, James Whitelock, and I hope you can join me and more amazing guests next time.